As I say, this meeting is part of the Granular Knowledge Transfer Accelerator, which is part of the Granular project, where I think there's still some mic issues around. Okay, that's fine. As I said, that's the thing where we have like a lot of people joining at the same time. So the focus, these seminars try to bring together research and policy and practitioners and new institutions, and we're happy that today is certainly not. It's certainly the case too, where we have public authorities, civil society, and practitioners. We have actually 144 participants registered, over 30 countries, and I know that the number that we have now are going to increase during the day. It's a very diverse audience between research, innovation, and networks, university, public authorities, NGOs, rural communities, and that is quite important because today we're going to discuss climate neutrality in rural areas, and that's definitely a collective effort. This event is rooted into a simple but present reality. Achieving EU objectives on climate neutrality by 2050 cannot only be done in urban areas, it needs to be done with rural areas where a lot of the resources of and also sizable part of the population of the EU lives, and therefore, and also the food system, the environmental protection, a lot of the land use, biodiversity challenges, climate resilience issues. So definitely that's not just an urban issue. The problem is that very often climate monitoring policy frameworks, climate resilience, and priorities tend to have implicit urban bias. It's not necessarily on purpose, but it's something that tends to happen. Sometimes it's also because having data is easier in rural areas, urban areas than in rural areas. So that's understood. And therefore, the particular focus of today's meeting is this webinar is about to focus specifically on rural areas, to move from ambition to implementation, to show climate neutrality in rural areas can be measured, can be monitored, can be translated to concrete actions, how EU policy, research, innovation can be support this transition. And for that reason, we're very happy. We will have first a number of speakers, starting with the European Commission. Sarah O'Brien, who works in DG Climate. She's involved in the Social Climate Fund, which is something that, knowing the timescale of the Social Climate Fund, will be keeping her very busy in the coming months. We will have then Tristan Berchou, who is a coordinator of GRANULAR from IAM Montpellier. It's a well-known research institution who is leading this project. He's actually replacing Yuval Damari, who's a colleague dealing with that piece of work on sustainability, science, and climate neutrality modeling, which is one of the results of the project. We will have then later two projects that are, in a way, somehow the successors or partly successors of GRANULAR, which has been started recently, Storcito, where we have Dr. Fernando Veiga Lopez from the University of Vigo, and Pedro Martinez from the Iconic project, who will be speaking later. And then we'll have a bit of a debate. So that is a bit the order for the day, and I hope we will be an interesting session. We will start with the policy context, then we'll follow with the results of these various projects, including starting, of course, GRANULAR, and then will be a moderated group discussion, which I'm afraid we'll have with me again on that role. But without further ado, and being aware that there's still some audio issues, as always is in these meetings, so maybe colleagues can identify. Okay, yes, thank you. So I think without further ado, I think we could just give the floor to the colleague from the Commission, Sarah O'Brien, which I mentioned is from the European Commission, DG Climate, works on the implementation of the Climate Fund and the European Emissions Trading System, which is actually the source of funding of the European Social Climate Fund. She worked before joining DG Climate. She worked in buildings and decarbonization, climate finance at the European Climate Foundation, and has been having several environmental policy roles in Brussels and Australia. So she will open the discussion, put a bit of context. People like us in Brussels, as you probably have guessed earlier with my comments, we're very aware of what a lot of the work that DG Climate is doing and the funding instruments that have been developed. But I think it's important for everybody to grant the discussion, to have a discussion or an opening statement on the European Union path to climate neutrality and how can EU climate tools can be translated to meaningful action on the ground. So without further ado, Sarah, the floor is yours. Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you very much, Serafin. I hope you can hear me well. Nice to be with you today, and thanks for asking the Commission to join. I will just bring up some slides I have. If you bear with me one moment. You should see my slides now. There we go.
Yes, perfect.
Great. So yeah, so what I wanted to, if I understand my task well, I think I'm supposed to outline the progress that Europe's made on the pathway to climate neutrality and resistance. So first, what I'm going to do is just outline the progress that's being made on climate action at EU level, discuss briefly some of the opportunities and challenges. And as Serafin mentioned, I'm working mostly on ETS2 implementation and the implementation of the Social Climate Fund. So I'm going to look at how we can illustrate, look at how we can explore some of those challenges and opportunities in implementing climate policy across different rural and urban contexts by looking at the Emissions Trading Scheme 2 and particularly the Social Climate Fund. So that's the outline for my little intervention now. So starting with progress, I imagine because all of you who joined this talk today about climate and you're working on climate, you know this picture quite well. You know, the case for climate action in the EU is clear. I'm sure the audience knows it very well. I just briefly summarize some of the impacts and how some of these impacts are particularly felt in rural areas. So heat is cross-cutting, it's felt in urban and rural areas. But when you look at issues like drought and water scarcity, the impacts are really felt in rural areas where the agriculture sector is quite prominent in the economy. Even heat waves, when you have communities that are more vulnerable because of their remote geographic location or because of their health status, the age profile, the demographics of the population, their socioeconomic status, that they can have an even stronger impact. And those communities can be more vulnerable. Similarly, fires have a particular impact in rural areas, and floods and extreme storm events can have a particular impact, like we've seen in this week's Storm Kristen in Portugal. So what is the EU doing to achieve climate neutrality? We have, as you would know, we've adopted this net zero target for 2050. And we have steadily decreased emissions since 1990. The interim targets for 2030 and 2040 will help us meet the climate neutrality goal. So for 2030, we have the target of 55% below 1990 levels. And that's an agreed and legally binding target. For 2040, we have an agreed target that's currently being finalized. So for the 2040 target, we have the Fit for 55 package of legislation that's being implemented now by the European Commission and by member states that will deliver the 2030 target. But for 2050, the European Commission proposed a legally binding climate target of 90% below 1990 emissions by 2040. In November last year, the member states have agreed to that target, and 85% of the emissions reductions would come from within the EU, but 5% of the target can be met through the use of international carbon credits. The European Parliament has also supported the 90% reduction. So the legislation is now going through the interinstitutional negotiations before it can become law. But once it's law, it will again be a legally binding target and will be up to the European institutions and the member states to implement the legislation and policies needed to meet the target. You'd all be familiar with the European Green Deal that was announced in 2019, but that the EU's commitment to the goals of the European Green Deal was confirmed again last year in 2025's Clean Industrial Deal, which positions decarbonisation as a driver of economic growth and prosperity. So under the Clean Industrial Deal, the EU commits to staying the course on the goals of the Green Deal, bringing down energy prices, supporting industrial competitiveness and resilience through, for example, the upcoming Industrial Accelerator Act, securing the future of European manufacturing and creating quality jobs. And the focus of the deal there is on industrial sectors particularly relevant to the transition to climate neutrality. So energy-intensive industries and the clean tech industry. And in terms of progress, you'll see here a nice quote that we're firmly on track to achieve our 2030 target. But it's worth noting that in 2024, which is the last year that we have covered in a state of the climate report, emissions were 37% lower than they were in 1990. And 2.5% lower than the previous year. And that's the largest annual decline that the EU had seen in quite some time. And yeah, projections show that we're on track to achieve the 55% target by 2030. And in fact, current policy settings will go a long way to contributing to the 90% target by 2040. But of course, achieving these goals is not without challenges and opportunities. So I just outline a few of them here that are quite relevant to the Social Climate Fund. So the point you made before, Seraphin, about making sure that the transition is not done to or for rural communities, but with rural communities really resonates. So how do we make sure the transition is socially fair and that all groups can participate in the transition and benefit from it? So fairness is a core issue. Finance is at the heart of the fairness issue. So how is the transition paid for? Who pays for it? Who benefits from it? And diversity. So how can the policies and instruments we need to achieve the transition be adapted to different rural and urban contexts? And so I'm going to go into just considering that for a moment. To talk about the Social Climate Fund, we need to talk about emissions trading first. So emissions trading is one of the key tools the EU is using to meet its climate targets. The first emissions trading schemes, so ETS1, has reduced emissions in the big industry and power sectors by 50% compared to 2005 levels, and has been one of the main drivers of Europe's decarbonisation efforts to date. And to build on this progress, the EU is going to strengthen this year the ETS1 through a revision of ETS1, and the EU is bringing in the building and road transport sectors into emissions trading through what is called ETS2. So it's a new trading tool that will apply to fuel suppliers in the building and road transport sectors from the 1st of January 2028. And just on this slide here, we just have a brief emissions trading 101 slide. For those of you who are not familiar with it, it's a cap and trade system. So an absolute cap is set on the total amount of greenhouse gas emissions that can be emitted by the regulated entities covered by the system, and the cap is reduced over time to meet the target and so that emissions fall. And then there's the trade element. So within that cap, the regulated entities can buy or sell emissions allowances and trade them with each other. And the price that creates a price signal that can be passed on to end consumers to incentivize emissions reductions. So why have an emissions trading scheme? So why have this ETS2 for buildings and transport? Firstly, as the 2022 energy crisis showed, our dependence on imported fossil fuels causes energy price volatility and higher supply costs, impacting households and their energy bills. And the dependence on imported fossil fuels is very high, particularly in the road transport sectors and in the building sectors. And together, these sectors are responsible for 36% of Europe's total emissions. Decarbonising these sectors unlocks multiple benefits for citizens. So lower energy bills, improved air quality, reduced congestion, better and more comfortable housing, quieter roads, and there's multiple benefits there. And one of the particular benefits of emissions trading is that it generates revenues that can then be used for further climate action and to help bring citizens, households, rural communities along in the transition. And that brings me to the Social Climate Fund. So that some of the revenue from the EU ETS 1 and 2, but particularly from ETS 2, will go to a new Social Climate Fund that starts this year. And it aims to support the most vulnerable citizens in the EU and those most affected by ETS 2 through a fund of 86 billion euros over the period from this year until 2032. And it aims to help mitigate the costs that they may experience from the beginning of ETS 2. Just a quick note on how that 86 billion euros will be distributed. The allocation of the funds under the Social Climate Fund, or SCF, I keep seeing this abbreviation popping up. I tried to read the slides of abbreviations, but I apologize, they still sometimes slip through. The allocation of the Social Climate Funds has a progressive redistributive effect across member states. So it takes into account the socio-economic and territorial dimension of each member state. When the regulation allocated the funds, it used different indicators in the allocation, and one to kind of take into account the levels of energy poverty, the transport poverty, the potential impacts of ETS 2. So to take into account transport poverty, it considered the population at risk of poverty living in rural areas. To take into account energy poverty, it considered the percentage of households at risk of poverty who were in arrears on their energy bills. It also looked at the CO2 emissions from fuel combustion within households, the share of emissions from the buildings and road transport sectors, and then the total population and the gross national income per capita. And that leads to this distribution here where you see there is a reallocation. So some countries are net beneficiaries, some are net contributors. And Poland, because of the size of its population, the fact that many households rely on solid fuel or gas combustion for their heating, and that the transport fleet is not heavily electrified yet, that receives the highest share, while Malta, being the smallest country in a relatively mild climate with not much heat demand, has the smallest share. What will the Social Climate Fund support? So it supports households, vulnerable micro enterprises, and vulnerable transport users in making investments to decarbonize their buildings, so energy efficiency, switching to electricity, to renewable energy, clean forms of heating and cooling. It supports them in switching to cleaner forms of transport, particularly electric transport and public transport. And member states also have the option of providing limited, targeted, and temporary direct income support to households to help them through the transition in cases where the implementation of ETS 2 will lead to higher energy bills. And this brings me to basically my final slide, where we talk about the rural dimension. So the Social Climate Fund will support rural areas in the transition. I already talked about how the allocation of funds between member states takes into account the population living in rural areas. But it's important to note out that one of the key goals of the Social Climate Fund is addressing transport poverty. And transport poverty has a very strong geographical dimension. You know this, whether or not you're an expert, you know this from your own experience. And is often more pronounced outside urban areas where access to public transport is limited. So member states can include investments that specifically address rural transport poverty in their social climate plans. So they can, we are currently in the process of negotiating the plans with the member states. So we are seeing in the drafts investments that support access to electric vehicles. So that can be grants, it can be social leasing schemes, investments in charging infrastructure in rural areas, strengthening public transport in low density population areas, on-demand transport. So where public transport is not a feasible option because of the geography of the territory or because of the times when transport is needed. So, for example, transport needs for workers who work at nighttime. On-demand transports can be a useful solution. And we start to see some member states proposing support to mobile health and social services for groups that have limited access to other transport options and who may have that lack of access is worsened by health and disability problems. So services can be provided to them in their home. The first social climate plan that's been approved was Sweden's social climate plan. It was approved in December last year, just over a month ago, and that is entirely focused on rural or low density areas. It includes one measure. It's an EV premium, and the 530 million euros in that plan will support low and lower middle income households to buy or lease EVs. So basically they can buy or lease an EV and they'll be paid a premium. Once they meet the eligibility criteria, they'll be paid a premium monthly to service the costs of that EV. And for the lowest income households, they'll also be assisted in their upfront cost that's needed. And the eligibility for that measure is restricted to rural municipalities or areas with limited access to public transport, so lower density population areas. So what we see in the social climate plan is that for buildings measures, we see that sometimes there needs to be an adaptation to the rural urban area because there's different heating systems being used in those areas. But we really see in the transport dimension, there is a need to take into account rurality as a factor in the vulnerability of households and transport users to the impacts of ETS2 and the costs of the transition. And I think that brings me to the end of my presentation. So I wanted to thank you and happy to have any questions in the discussion later.
Thank you very much. I mean, for people like me who are following the Social Climate Fund, and so there are many questions that I will probably not cover today, but definitely I'll try to sneak some of that in the debate later. But I think before getting into that, because I will be getting some people interested in that, let's cover the rest of what we're here today now. So I think now after the general context, so thank you very much for the introduction. We will have a bit of a contribution to this topic from the GRANULAR project itself. And we are very pleased to have Tristan Berchou, which is the coordinator of GRANULAR, who will be speaking about sustainability, science and climate neutrality modeling. And essentially the work we've been doing in terms of, and his institution has been doing, particularly IAM Montpellier, Agricultural Institute of the Mediterranean, Montpellier to be precise, where we're basically working on how robust usable indicators can support decision making in rural climate strategies. Because as he will mention, a lot of what this project does is to have better data to make more informed decisions. And sometimes this data is difficult to reach or to process, and that's some of the solutions we're developing this project. But without further ado, the floor is yours, Tristan, if you can make it, because I think we're probably in some IT issue, but I'm sure it's working fine now, so thank you.
Go ahead. It's working, yeah.
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Serafin, and well, thanks to all the colleagues from AIDL as well for organizing this events and for giving me the floor. So I will present today some of the work we have done in GRANULAR on climate neutrality. So it's quite a different stance than what we have seen so far. So our approach was really to look at a local level, so at rural communities, and how these communities, how we can support them in their climate neutrality transition. So this work was led by Yuval Damari, who unfortunately cannot present today. But I would also like to acknowledge Carlos Tapia, who is leading the work package in which this work has been done, who has contributed a lot as well to make this, to improve that work. So I will just start with a short outline of what I will be covering. So I'll present the conceptual framework that we developed that is tailored for rural communities, and how we use that framework to build some indices with some results that we have, and then how this framework can be, how modular it is, and how the weights can be changed by the local stakeholders themselves in order to match the needs and challenges of their specific areas. And then before moving to the trade-offs and scenarios that we have developed, and a policy toolbox that we are providing as well, before concluding. So as an introduction, so it's been already mentioned before, so I won't go over it in depth, but one thing that we've seen is the policy shift that has been done in the past 10 years, let's say, about rural areas, so from more passive recipients to active protagonists in the green transition. Just in a side note, the project for us, we are working more closely with DG Agri than DG Klima, and that's also why our focus is specifically and uniquely on rural areas. So we are fitting, apart from the European Green Deal, this also is our work fits in the long-term vision for rural areas that was developed by DG Agri and published in 2021, where there was also this component of resilience, so the resilient component of rural areas, which is also linked a lot with this Green Deal and the climate neutrality of rural communities. In a nutshell, for rural areas, what we see, some of the challenges, so the limited infrastructure, there are some digital gaps that we see, demographic decline, and an economic dependence on the traditional sectors. However, for the climate neutrality and the green transition, there are some opportunities, of course, regarding renewable energy, carbon sequestration, circular economy, sustainable agriculture. So as we decided to have two different objectives for this work. One is to build an index that is tailored for rural communities, so a tool and an index that can be used by local communities in order to basically decide on the different actions they could take and the priorities they should focus on. And the second objective is to have actionable policy measures. So we reviewed a bunch of policy measures that are implemented at the local level with the skill sets of local communities and what they can do legally, just to see how they can lead that transition as well. Now, I would like here to mention some other challenges that we've seen being at this local community level, which is very different from targets at the EU level, let's say. One is the problem with reliable and harmonized data. So they are often scarce at rural local level, and which is somehow hindering evidence-based decision making. The second point, and this is also what GRANULAR was, the main objective is also to tackle this issue of data. The second point is that rural communities, they differ widely, so there is a wide diversity in terms of size, economic structure, geography, infrastructure. So there is these climate neutrality transitions or pathways, they are very context specific. And however, our framework, we wanted also to be a Europe-wide framework. So that means we can apply it in different communities across the EU to support monitoring as well at the EU level and policy alignment. So these are some ambitious goals. So of course, the framework we developed is trying to address this with some limitations, of course, as you can imagine. I will not focus on the whole framework since I don't have the time for this. And here I've put the DOI to the report that we built where the whole framework is detailed. Now, the framework, as I was saying, is designed for rural settlements. So the thing is that we are trying to balance here local relevance with a European-wide applicability. And we are trying to address different characteristics of rural areas with some customization to fit local needs. So it's a modular approach, basically. And what we are integrating are indicators from multiple domains that are linked to climate neutrality. So you can see we have transport, industry, waste, agri-food, buildings, and energy. So 6 different domains that we focused on. So all of these domains were not chosen randomly, of course. So we conducted an extensive literature review, both academic literature and mostly academic literature, but also policy documents, so to understand the main domains that were coming up in the literature. And for each one of these domains, we have several values that we decided to focus on. And as you can see on the example of the energy side on the right, we have values such as environmental sustainability applied to the domain of energy, in this case, the resilience of the energy sector, the efficiency, and also to have an echo to what Sarah O'Brien was saying before, the just access as well, which is something we focus on. And for each one of these values, we have a set of indicators, each one measuring a different aspect of these values. So it was quite a bit of work to have a number of indicators that is relevant and where we have data. We came from more than 150 indicators down to 1 indicator for each value to make sure this is also easy to use. And the indicators, again, with the risk of repeating myself, we chose them through a literature review as well. And we then combine all of the scores for the different indicators using different weighting methods in order to have an index at the end of the work. So this is on the top part of this framework. Now the bottom part is more on the policy measure that I was mentioning before. So we are also creating a toolbox of policies which are relevant at the local level for each domain and values. So we used 2 different databases for that. One is the European Environmental Agency, and the other one is the platform of the Covenant of Mayors. Where we basically filtered all the policies that exist and that have been documented on these different domains for rural settlements. So we had to put a cap for defining those rural settlements. We chose to put it at 10,000 people. So under that, we considered them as small rural communities. Above that, we discarded them. Otherwise, it would have been too many of these policies. And then we grouped them, and I will present very quickly some of these results. Some of the maps that we produce. So something that I have to point here is that you see a map here that is at national level, and also we have NUTS 2 level. This is due to the fact that some of the indicators local level do not have much say in it, so it's very difficult for them to have a legal system that can enable them to have any kind of decision making at this level. So it was mentioned before, for example, subsidies or support for electric vehicles. This is rarely at a local level, but it's still important for us to include it because it can have some different declination at the national level. So we have some national level indicators that will of course be all encompassing, and then some levels that are NUTS 2, because also regions might have some European funding that they are channeling in a specific way. So we thought it's also important to include it. But then the final and the most of our indicators are at LAU level. And here we have also some example of those indicators. So as you can imagine, it's quite difficult sometimes to have indicators at such a resolution. So one of the, and this is one of the limitations that we face. And what we did was to use downscaling methods for those indicators in order to get LAU level metrics. For most of them, we use the IPAT methods, which states that an impact, and that's usually an environmental impact, is equal to the size of the population times the affluence, which is often referred to as the income per capita. And we used a data set that has been published recently as well for having a local level metrics on this. So there will be a lot of discussion on this, and we can have, because of course there is a choice here, which is to use these downscaling methods, and with some caveat, of course, that we can discuss later on. But I'll see that my time is running, so I will just close my presentation. In terms of weighting, and this is where the modular part of our framework is important. So all the different indicators and values, we can change the weight. We still provided as a measure of transparency and also to have something that is applicable. We used a Google Trends indicator method, which is something that we also found in the literature. It's using Google Trends data about search volumes to set different weights of the indicators. This was just for us to have a European level analysis that we could also feed to DG Agri as a part of the outputs of the project. So I'm not going to go in depth, but just for you to have an idea, this is how it looks like. So when we are basically checking on Google Trends, the main domains that are relevant for local scale. So again, we prompted in that case the domain with the local level lengths. Energy comes first, agri-food comes second, and as you can see, transport comes last. And this is also due to the fact that a lot of those indicators that are relevant for local scale, they are not really decided at a local scale, except sometimes for road network or such things. But for the major subsidies, they are usually decided at a national scale. So that's also why it appears less important according to that work. Now, we also had in mind to do some analysis on trade-offs, and here we computed several types of correlation to understand where we had strong correlations in our index, either positive or negative. And maybe some of the most important one was there is usually a strong positive correlation between energy, so the energy domain, the reliability of this energy sector, and the affordability of this energy sector. So municipalities that have an affordable energy system also have a reliable energy system. So that's a correlation or association rather than definitely correlation here. And in the negative association, we have, for example, the efficiency in the energy sector with the environmental sustainability, which is not necessarily something that we would think directly negatively associated. But these are some of the findings we had. We also provided some scenarios in order to understand what it will change in terms of ranking for the different countries. So if we aggregate all these municipalities at the country level, just to also give some pointers to the European Commission as part of our outputs, we had different policy scenarios that are a bit extreme, let's say, just based on increasing the weights of some specific values. So that can be environmental sustainability or the affordability. They would echo some strategic decision that would be taken by the European Commission. But basically, we see different movements in terms of rankings between countries. So that would show some improvements. For example, the environmental priority would improve the ranking for Greece or Portugal. So that means that will help them to perform better, while there would be some drop for other countries. And just before closing, a snapshot on some of these policy toolbox that I was mentioning. So we have a paper that is now in revision that should be published in the coming month, where we reviewed, as I was mentioning, the different type of databases with a focus on local areas, on the different policy measures that we see, and the different measures by type, so regulatory or procurement type, or informational policy or operational. And as we see that a lot of these policy measures were on the clean energy sector, so that was the main thing that captured most of the policies that were documented in those databases. So yeah, I'll stop here, but happy to have any discussion later. And as a conclusion, and that's also the conclusion from our policy understanding, there is a mismatch between domains that are highly relevant and feasible for rural municipalities and their actual degree of implementation. So we have some priorities, but often the tools for policy tools, they are not necessarily matching this at the local level, and vice versa. And for example, in the local policy portfolios at the moment, so the one that are documented, and again, that's one limitation of our study. We don't really have databases that have all the local policies that exist, but climate adaptation or water quality that are still part of these climate neutrality targets, they are largely absent from these portfolios. And a lot of the instruments that we see at the local level are informational and sometimes operational, but this limits the capacity of rural municipalities to affect or to lead that transformative change. The financial regulatory planning tools, they are either underutilized or they do not exist at this level. And that's also something that we are pointing to that should be addressed. And again, depending on the countries, those tools exist or not. And that's one of the findings we had. I'll stop here. Thank you very much, and apologies. I've been a bit longer than what I was asked to.
Thank you, Tristan. I think it's helpful that you went a bit long, because we started discussing ambition and a big instrument. We'll discuss later the Social Climate Fund, which is a huge instrument. But then we need to know what we are doing that for and what are the problems. And I think you clearly highlighted that this project has advanced the stage of knowledge and the excellence and the tools that could be used. There's still a lot of issues to be looked at. And on that very logic, I will move on to the next speaker, Fernando Veiga Lopez from the University of Vigo, because the next two speakers are actually going to discuss some follow-up issues that Granular is discussing, and they are trying to advance it further, because there are two projects that have been launched earlier a few months ago. And Estorcito, in the case of Fernando, who is an associate professor at the University of Vigo, so he's a compatriot and neighbor of mine, as I'm from there too. He's the co-founder of the AeroLab research group, which reads research at the intersection of combustion physics, safety, and energy systems. He also, I think, teaches about avionics and engineering in aerospace, if I'm not mistaken, for what I could just check myself in the website of the University of Vigo. But specifically within Estorcito, which is, as I mentioned, a New Horizon Europe project, which takes a bit part of the mantle and it's been conceived like that of Granular. He leads the development and of of something that if you are from a rural area in Galicia like myself, where we have a lot of forests, we have as many forests as Finland, there's a lot of wildfires. So what they are doing in that project, for instance, is high-resolution wildfire risk mapping framework, integrating a lot of data sets, physical, environmental, and so on. And that's one of the main issues of the project, wildlife risk assessment. But before I extend too long, I will give the floor to Fernando to present how climate neutrality frameworks can be operationalized through real-world technical innovation. So without further ado, Fernando, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for Serafin. I will go through the presentation. I hope that all of you can see it now. Am I sharing correctly? Yes, perfect. So thank you so much, Serafin, for the presentation, and also for inviting me to talk here about our brand new project, Distorcido, which just, as you said, we started 8 months ago. My idea on this presentation was to make it as brief as possible and just talk about what we are doing now. We have already preliminary results. We are early in the project, but I can share with you what we are doing. So my idea is to show you our main ideas or objectives that we had when we designed this project, and also where we are and what we tend to do in the next years. So see if we can help rural communities with our solutions, and also helping on these climate actions from rural communities. Here you can see this beautiful picture from Galician rural area. This is a part of Lugo, in which we are developing our pilots. First, the consortium. I will be quick here. We are the main coordination. There's a Vigo. We have Contactica for the dissemination part. INORDE is a political institution here from the area of Ourense, so they can give us access to to certain rural areas. We have also Innogando, which is a technology company, a small company set also in Galicia here in Lugo, and they are bringing new technologies to the cattlemen. This is very interesting. They are participating very actively in the project. Sintef in Norway, they take care mostly of mobility plans. I will tell you later. Group in the University of Ruhr, Bochum, which is also taking care of the energy part of the project. You will see that we have different lines of research here during Distorcido. The Agricultural University of Athens, which helps us in this wildfire monitoring, as Serafin spoiled me before. And also we have this Technische Hochschule of Deggendorf, that they take care of creating the digital tools that we aim to do here within Distorcido. Utrecht plays a critical role on analyzing the energy communities in rural areas around Europe. And finally, Nimmo and Gjesdal Kommun are also from Norway, that they take active part on the mobility solution that we propose from Distorcido to improve the mobility in rural areas, which is a mess, to be honest. So you all know the European rural world reality. Just three main points, which only 30% of the population is there. So that's why that could be the main reason, as Serafin said before, that most of the political solutions and technologies are biased by rural minds, mostly because most of the people living in urban areas. But the territory of the rural world of Europe is huge, is vast. So 83% of the territory is considered to be rural, and they house critical resources that we have to defend, which are like agriculture, food, and energy mostly. So there are several challenges that you know from the rural's perspective, and we just wanted to focus on some of them. 3 to be more specific. So which are kind of different, and we go through them with different levels or degrees of implementation. The first one will be like the sustainable management of forests and wildfire prevention. I will tell you before which is our solution. This will be like the challenge or problem. Then also we have this transition of citizens to sustainable energy systems in rural communities, and we also want to shift to inclusive climate neutral mobility in rural areas, which the conventional mobility is already an issue. Just putting it in climate neutral mobility we can solve two problems at the same time. So the Storsito main objective, like in the season, like with big words, this will be like the official objective. It will be to contribute to this sustainable, balanced, equitable, and inclusive development of rural areas. How do we tend to do that? We want to combine a lot of disciplines. We are a very multidisciplinary team, so bringing together technical knowledge. That's why for instance, I'm an aerospace engineer, and we have agriculture engineers and so on, social and also organizational. So we have also politicians in our team, so we can have a lot of points of view. And we also want to take into account also the rural communities. So we collaborate with them from the very beginning, and we wanted also to do that in several regions of Europe, so we could cover most of the bioclimatic areas in which the realities are very different. As I said, this will be the official objective. I usually like to summarize it a bit and bring it to normal words. I will say that our objective will be like to transform and adapt urban balance technologies to be used in the rural areas. So we can match these the needs that there are in rural communities. So for that we have several specific objectives. I will stop here a bit. Like for the first one, the wildfire monitoring, we want to use nature-based solutions and also digital tools to improve the wildfire prevention activities in rural areas all around Europe, mostly in Galicia and Greece, which are two areas we have a lot of problems regarding wildfires, and also managing these forest resources. So we will, with this wildfire prevention, you can create a lot of forest resources that you can use later for other needs. The second will be like to develop CCUs, to try to understand if CCUs could be used in rural areas, so how the rural communities feel about bringing CCUs, which CCUs means carbon capture and usage and storage. So taking the carbon CO2 from the air and using it in different, transforming it into different things. And so we want to analyze how these CCUs could be implemented in rural areas, and if the communities of rural areas are aware of these kind of technologies. And third, it will be the third leg, will be to try to bring on-demand transport with a digital tool, and exploring how these demand transport solutions that work already from several years ago in rural areas can be developed in rural communities. So that's where we are working now. And also we have an objective of communication and dissemination, which is what we are doing now, for instance. So we want to put the results of Storsito to the rural communities all around Europe. So, as I said before, we want to bring the solutions to all Europe. So when designing the consortium, we carefully took people from all the bioclimatic areas of Europe. So we have at least one representative on this, and we are going to test or have already tested our solutions in different areas. So we can see if we can, let's say, expand it to the whole Europe. So specifically, the technical solutions that we propose, we divided in these three main lines. So first, starting from the wildfire prevention and forest management, we just want to do two things. One, create a wildfire prevention, wildfire risk digital tool in which you can have a very detailed wildfire risk in an order of meters, so you can exactly know where you have a high risk. Okay, because now the existing tools are in a scale of municipalities or even provinces or regional. In a regional scale, we wanted to bring it to 1 meter scale, so everybody can know exactly where there's a high wildfire risk. So this will improve the efficiency of wildfire management, for instance. And also, we want to test if it is possible to use this information of wildfire risk. We can feed, for instance, these GPS collars that can guide cattle, like virtual fencing. So we can guide cattle so that they can take care and clean certain forestal areas. So we can use animals to for wildfire prevention. Then regarding the energy system solution, energy communities, again, we want to understand, to show CCUs to rural communities, to see which is the level of knowledge of these kind of solutions, and to analyze whether they are willing to take them into their house or not. That's mostly it. And finally, for the mobility part, we want to, NIMO has an existing application and an existing idea, mostly based on urban areas. And now we are modifying it, transforming it, adapting it to rural scenarios. That's mostly our solution in the mobility transport. In the meanwhile, we will write some standard and policy recommendations. We are doing a lot already, a lot of seminars locally here in Galicia and all around Norway and also Germany and Greece. We have a huge implication of the communities as well, and we are writing some guidelines for trying to replicate everything in the whole Europe. That would be amazing to follow up on the project. So we'll just take two more minutes, if possible, to just show you what we have already done in 8 months and what we plan to do in the next 2 years and a half approximately. So regarding the first sub-project, let's call it like that, we have this wildfire prevention idea. So we have already developed this code that we are doing. I'm the one that my team is doing this code. So we have it ready already. So you can see here the first results, preliminary result of the wildfire risk in Galicia, one random day what we chose, in which we take into account a lot of information. As I told you before, the scale that they are currently using is super huge. It's not detailed. We want to make it very, very detailed, meter scale, and we also we want to take into account all this information. Currently, they are only using mostly the weather information. So we want to take it, consider also which kind of vegetation, social part, the human part, the history of the regions, if there were many wildfires or not, etc., etc. So we have this already ready. So this information we will now develop this digital tool, a web-based tool that will be very interactive, so people can get access to this information. And we will also fit the colors of Innogando. Innogando have already have their roomy colors, which are they sell them. This is like for tracking where the cows or different kind of cattle are, and also monitoring their vital activity, so their heart rate, their stress, whatever. So now they have modified them. They put it virtual fencing, so we can guide these cows with the GPS. And the idea is that to guide the cows where we found in our pilot where there's a high risk of wildfire. So these cows could clear this part, and we can maintain the forest with this using a natural-based solution. We also have a very social part on this sub-project. So we wanted to see which is the social point of view of the different communities in Galicia and Greece regarding wildfires. So we finished the first round of interviews in Galicia and Greece to see the perspective of different actors in the rural community. So we have stakeholders, we have citizens, we have politicians, and we already have we just sent it like a couple of weeks ago, the results to the commission. So the next step will be like to update the new web application with this wildfire risk information. We are already preparing the pilot, so we will bring the colors, the updated colors with the cows, also with the wildfire risk information, and now we will check if we can move the cows to the areas which we want to clear. Moreover, the second project, just too quick. This project is not so. The first project is very we have a huge application, so the idea is to bring something feasible to the end of the project. This CCUS project, which is the community energy solution sub-project, is more in a theoretical part. So we are analyzing whether these CCUS are a possibility in rural communities. So we just define and design a series of interviews, and we have already the preliminary results. So the first results is like there is a mixed acceptance of CCUs depending on who you ask. and mostly depending on the information about this kind of technology that the people have. And also, most of the interviews have found that the people prefer very local and small CCU solution, and they don't want to see huge industries around their homes. That's a good first step. And from here, we are gonna keep working. So we are gonna open these interviews to more people to have more information and more data, mostly in the part in Central Europe, in Germany, and we are gonna start working on this statistical package. So from the information that we take from the interviews, we can set like a kind of map in which the CCU will be an option, a viable option for the future. That would be a good thing for the local politicians. Regarding the last thing, I will just close here. The mobility part of the project, we started like analyzing which are the necessities and needs of rural communities, and if they will see this on-demand solution as a viable option. The first idea is that they found it viable. They like the idea.
Could you speed up a bit, because we
Sure.
need to move to the next speaker. Sorry, my apologies. I know there's a lot of moving parts in this project, but it's just
That's
a
okay.
question of time.
This is the final part. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
So we just had the first interviews, and we have this. This is a viable, but we need to consider their needs. So to make it possible, and that's mostly it. So we are working on that. Thank you so much for inviting us here to show what we are doing. Thank you.
Thank you, much appreciated. It looks a great thing, and hopefully we'll be able to talk in other moments on the details. Certainly, I'm very personally interested on this for obvious reasons, as I have my house there is surrounded by forest. Anyway, and we have problems of mobility, as it was known in our part of the world. We will move on to Pedro Martinez, which also had to step in as short notice by one of his colleagues, Jesus Febres, from the ICONIC project. ICONIC, like Storcito, started relatively a few months ago, and builds on some of the experiences that Granular is still doing. I mean, still for the next 6 months, but this is a bit continuation, design as a continuation of projects like Rustic on Granular. Jesus is an engineer, works on machine learning, modeling of thermodynamics, numerical simulation, optimization, and within this project, Jesus focused on energy independence, climate neutrality, rural and insular communities, and how advanced modeling and digital tools, including AI, can support scalable, resilient solutions. Without further ado, I will give you the floor, Pedro.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here at this workshop as part of Granular project. Granular is an European reference and also to us in rural sustainability. My name is Pedro Martinez, and I am an energy communities advisor for ICONIC project coordination. Today, I'm representing my colleague Jesus Febres, ICONIC's project coordination at R2M Solutions Spain. In this presentation, I want to briefly show you what ICONIC is and how it contributes to sustainability and climate neutrality in Europe's rural areas, aligned with Granular mission. By the end, I hope we will identify collaboration opportunities and synergies with Granular, and the other projects are here today. So, what is ICONIC? ICONIC is a forward-looking project designed to enhance energy independence, climate neutrality, and sustainable development in rural and in special islands communities across Europe. So at its core, we work through 3 interconnected pillars, achieving true energy independence through local renewable resources, also implementing circular economy principles to maximize resource efficiency and driving both social and technological innovation tailored to rural realities. The aim of the project is to not be theoretical. It's about creating practical, replicable models that European rural areas can adopt across the continent. Why rural islands? Across Europe, many rural islands face amplified challenges. The limited economic opportunities, the geographical isolation of islands, and heavy dependence on expensive and unsafe external energy imports. Their unique geography is a double-edged sword. Yes, physical isolation increases energy vulnerability and logistical costs, but this same isolation creates an special opportunity for our project. Islands become perfect pilots to test self-sufficient solutions that could scale to any rural European territory. So, where we are developing our project? We are developing real-world pilots in 3 islands of Europe. The first one is La Graciosa in Spain's Canary Islands. The second one is Inismore in Ireland, and Berkida in Sardinia, Italy. Working closely with local stakeholders of these islands in each island and adapting the project objectives to the particularities of each location, such as the production of biogas from livestock waste in Ireland or water desalination in La Graciosa. So the five main pillars the iconic project has are the 5 main objectives that guide everything we do. The first one is climate neutrality, delivering zero carbon operations across our pilots. The second one is to empower rural islands, building local ownership and decision-making capacity, like promoting energy communities in those locations. The third one is fostering innovation, both technological and social, tailored to rural context and the particularities of each island. Also, innovative governance spaces, creating new multi-stakeholder models that actually work. So we are promoting in a lot of projects of the European Union and this space. The final one is spreading the word. Systematically, we share our learnings to other projects or to the communities. So how we deliver our project? Through a powerful combination of technological and social innovations. Technological innovations include deployment of renewable energy systems like solar PV or biogas that are tailored to each island's resources. Also, the development of rural smart grids and local energy markets to deploy all these systems of renewable energy. The third one would be smart water management and desalination plants for human consumption, and also for agricultural irrigation. Also, we develop off-grid biogas systems, converting local waste to renewable energy. The final one would be to promote the sustainable mobility solutions for these small and isolated communities. Social innovations are equally critical. Climate municipal working groups are being promoted to bring together local government and citizens. Also multi-actor climate assemblies, creating genuine participatory governance. At the final social innovation are energy communities as vectors of transformation and a socially based sustainable future for these islands, and also for all rural areas in Europe. All these are being deployed right now in our 3 pilots with local stakeholders and co-designing every step. In conclusion, and for ending, our vision aligns perfectly with GRANULAR and other projects that are here. We want to advance in climate neutrality in rural areas through energy transition and circular economy. We see tremendous value in knowledge transfer and shared learning between our projects. So thank you very much for your attention. We are so excited about exploring collaboration opportunities with GRANULAR and other projects represented here. For example, I was listening the other participants, and I think we can apply the methodology you develop in your projects, and also give data of our energy communities and our pilots to you. So we can schedule some meeting to explore concrete collaboration opportunities. Please, sorry.
No, yes, thank you very much. I thought just finished. No, thank you very much. I mean, that's the purpose as well as doing these cross project activities. GRANULAR is still for half a year. It's a final conference. In June there is the final. There is the final session of the KTA, which is like a big meeting in March, but also the structures we have developed in the project would actually be open for continuation collaboration to other projects after project ends. So definitely we'll be approaching yourself and the other and the other projects for that. But being aware of the time, I think, and always happens when you have like a lot of speakers with interesting comments to make. Now it's time for a bit of a discussion. I'm sure that we have seen already in the chat some people who have to make some questions, and thanks those who have replied, so like Sarah, so that she replied in several instances to difficult questions, which is understandable considering where we are in the process at the moment with Social Climate Fund. But without having to volunteer questions myself, which I have many, I would like to give the floor to anybody who would like to make a question to any of the colleagues. Colleagues from ADL, let me know if there's any raised hands. I'm just trying to check myself, as I always find difficult with Teams. Oh yeah, sorry, Carlos. Well, I mean, it's only right and proper that Carlos speaks because Carlos has been working a lot in this particular part. So please, the floor is yours, Carlos, from Norwegian.
Okay. Thank you so much, Sarfin. Thank you also to the presenters. I think were really interesting projects and initiatives being discussed today. My name is Carlos Tapia. I'm one of the partners, representing one of the partners in GRANULAR, which is Norwegian. We are coordinating one work package in that project. And I have a question for the first presenter, Sarah O'Brien. I think you described how the Social Climate Fund was distributing funds according to the population and the population at risk of poverty living in rural areas. And I guess that is a criteria or a criterion among many other to distribute funds to each member state. But then I was wondering if there's any mechanism to actually verify or check or enable those funds to be transferred to rural areas, or is it up to the member states to decide how to use those funds?
Thank you, Carlos. It's a really good question. Yes, indeed, it is up to member states to develop social climate plans, which are then approved by the European Commission. And that's what we're currently negotiating with the member states now. But there are, of course, constraints on how the member states can use the funding. And the Social Climate Fund is quite unique in that it is a requirement that all funds be targeted to vulnerable groups. So it needs to, all the benefits of the funds need to be fully enjoyed or transferred to vulnerable households, vulnerable transport users, or vulnerable micro enterprises. The regulation sets some definitions on how the Commission and the European institutions see those groups, but it's up to the member states to define those groups and how they will operationalize those definitions in their country. And then we will approve the definitions if they generally align with what's in the regulation. The member states can use, we won't set targets, for example, that this should be fully allocated to rural areas, but the member states in some cases are using residents in a rural area as a criteria for belonging to one of those groups. So there are some cases where for vulnerable transport users, to be considered a vulnerable transport user and therefore eligible for support under the transport investments, they need to reside in a in a rural area. In Sweden, you need to reside in a rural municipality or a low density area. So it's not that there's a specific target or earmarking, but in practice, the way that the criteria and the definitions will apply, it will result in some of those funds being really only available to groups in rural areas or low density areas or areas that have poor public transport for other reasons. I hope that answers the questions, but happy to clarify if necessary.
Yes, it does. Thank you so much.
That would be, I mean, the Social Climate Fund is, when this was announced in the State of the Union address in September 2020, many of us thought it would not happen because it was just Next Generation was approved like 2 months earlier, and so that will not happen. So as surprising happens, and it's revolutionary because, as you mentioned, the way it was financed, the combination of different definitions, including income support, which is traditionally not something that the EU funds do, and then there is something even more revolutionary, at least for people like us working policy in cohesion and rural areas and so on, which is the definition of transport poverty, which I already know some countries are actually for the first time identifying a concept that didn't exist at all. They could have created something domestically, but it's actually because of the decision of June 2025 is creating there. I don't know if you have any additional, particularly on transport poverty, just to, because it's a big fund, but any insights about how countries are developing? For instance, I know Spain is doing a very thorough job, for instance, but I mean, if there's any, in terms of transport poverty, there's any particular insight or any good ideas that are already emerging within the state that are in very early stages and negotiation and so on, with all the caveats that are taken.
Yeah, with all the caveats that exist, that I think it's clear that transport poverty is a newer concept to member states than energy poverty. Even energy poverty is difficult to apply, but transport poverty probably even more difficult because you do need to take into account the territorial dimension and the existence of public transport. You also need to take into account the temporal dimension. So you have the problem of night workers who cannot access public transport during off-peak hours. I wanted to say something that's just slipped my mind, but there is another point to make, that there's a Social Climate Fund, but one other point around ETS2 is now all the other revenue that doesn't go to the Social Climate Fund has to be used for either climate action or helping communities adjust to the impacts of climate policy, including ETS2. And so it's not just the Social Climate Fund, but the member states also, and the member states have much more discretion on those points. It doesn't have to be towards vulnerable households, it can be towards a broader group. But the member states also have this other pool of funding now, or they will have after 2028, that they can also use for climate action and for supporting communities in the transition. The other point has not come back to me, so I apologize for that. But Yeah, but it's definitely clear that transport poverty is a much. That was the last point. The other difficult dimension of transport poverty and the transport investments is you have a lot more compared to energy poverty, where the interventions there's many challenges around intervening in people's buildings, many challenges, but with transport poverty interventions, there are a lot more investments that are collective in nature. So you have public transport, you have investments in railway and things like that, and it's much more difficult to target it just towards vulnerable groups. So that's something we're grappling with now, is how to make sure, of course, you can't exclude non-vulnerable groups, but how to make sure it really serves and benefits those vulnerable groups.
Yes, and that's without even getting discussions of the new MFF and how it's going to be the whole architecture. But perhaps that will be for a different day, if you may, in a different context, perhaps. But thank you for being so open about the inevitable challenges, because this is defining a whole new public policy problem and agenda and solution. So that's that's not an easy thing. So that's being addressed at last. Maybe Fernando, from Mr. Tito, maybe a comment about that your project is always starting, of course. So it's understandable you are still having early thoughts, but your project is testing concrete solutions for related to climate neutralities. What at the start of the project, of course, you think are the main challenges in terms of scaling from pilots, which is what you're doing? What do you think you will be the first few months, of course? Well, the potential challenges for eventually scaling up the solutions of the project further on. I mean, that's just as a fresh perspective compared to perhaps the project ourselves in GRANULAR. We've been doing that for 3 years already.
Well, I think is that the idea of the project is to bring the give the solutions. No, like we have tested it, see if they work or not, and from there. This is mostly maybe out of the house. I would say that the main challenge will be how to keep it working. How to keep the funding coming to this kind of solution, so they don't go to they don't are useless at all. No? So the idea is, I would say the main challenge will be that, like, we can create the pilots, we can see that they test, but to keep working on that. There should be a different kind of funding, or they have to be autonomous, and this is super difficult to find the solution within our project context. I think that we can provide the technical developments, some proposals regarding these 3 topics, but then there should be other people or other startups or people that want to keep developing these tools and use them as to get money with them, and so they can keep going. Or maybe the local governments, if they want to keep the for instance the wildfire prevention tool. I think that the ideal would be like the local rural governments get an appeal of the tool, and after that they want to keep using it. With that, I think that there will be any kind of companies, startup of people that will keep working on that part. That will be an example. But then from my perspective, that's the main challenge, because I really believe that we are going to take the technical solutions, we are going to adapt them, they are going to work, 100%, 99% sure, but then we want to select the correct stakeholders, show the correct people our tools, so they can keep that we can keep them alive after Starseed. And we are trying to do that from the very beginning. So
that's good, because sometimes we know from the perspective of several Horizon projects, sometimes this has gone far too much at the end, and it actually should be from the beginning, at least having that perspective, because that was to influence how you develop the project. I mean, I have to say that in the discussion we're having here in Brussels in terms of the new Horizon Europe, but also the new funding instruments, one thing that's been discussed about that replication. And not necessarily having more money from the EU to replicate or to escalate, but actually to create governance approaches, pan-European and domestic, so this naturally can easily replicate it rather than just depending on the voluntarism of people. So that's something that looking at.
I think that the main idea that we have to how to do this is like from week one, we've been working around the rural communities here in Galicia, which is what we have in mind. We have close and also in other parts of Europe. We intend to move it to other countries as well, and show them what we want to do, show them our solutions so they can already feel them from the very beginning and they can be part of it as well.
Okay, I think given the time, and unless I hear a burning call, I will just ask Pedro, sorry, my apologies. Pedro, a similar question. I mean, in your case, what is the one change in both either policy, funding, or local engagement that, in your view, will accelerate climate neutrality in rural areas, particularly in rural islands, so to speak, as it is focused on your project?
I think this topic, we focus this topic on energy communities. You know, if we get sustainable, also to the future, sustainable projects of energy communities, we can get funds, we can get economic sustainability, and we can get this climate mitigation and climate neutrality from the production of renewable energy based on those energy communities. And if we achieve social-based projects and renewable energy projects on these energy communities in those islands, we can get self-sufficient projects to get the climate neutrality.
Okay. No. Well, all the best hope, and definitely we'll follow up with perhaps we can do some activity together during the duration of the project. So without further ado, you have heard far too much of me, exceptionally. Normally this is shared a bit with my colleague Merve, who's the one that's doing day-to-day of the KTA together with our colleague Maite. So she will provide some conclusions about next steps, and of course, all for me to thank the speakers for the presentation and nice debate. So thank you very much for your contribution. Merve, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Serafin, and hello everyone. I'm Marvin Tabouache from ADOL. As Serafin was mentioning, we lead the work on communication and dissemination and this series of webinar as part of the Knowledge Transfer Accelerator. So to conclude the session, I would first like to thank all of the speakers who joined today for sharing their expertise and experiences, and for all of you in the audience for joining us. So as I was saying, this webinar is part of the Granular Knowledge Transfer Accelerator, which aims to create spaces like this one where researchers, practitioners, policymakers, and other stakeholders can exchange knowledge, tools, and also good practices for the future of rural areas. So the next KTA event will take place on 19th March, and it will take the form of a bootcamp where 2 sessions are going to be organized on the same day. So just to give you a quick overview, so one of the events will focus on going beyond GDP metrics, and we'll explore the limitations of GDP and also introduce some approaches to measure well-being and quality of life in rural areas, and share also some research which was led in the Granular project on this topic. And then we'll have a second event which will focus on performance indicators in the new MFF and what they mean for the future of rural areas. So more information and also the registration, if you want to join the event, will be shared in the coming weeks, so you'll be able to register. We also encourage you to join the KTA community to stay informed about the upcoming activities and also to continue the exchange with other stakeholders. And a few months ago, so the Granular KTA community has partnered with the Rural Pact Community Group on innovating rural public policy. So this is also a great opportunity for you to stay connected and to stay involved in this topic even beyond the end of the Granular project. So the recording and materials from this event will be shared on the website by next week, and then we'll also prepare a highlights report with the main conclusions from the event. So thank you again, everyone, for joining us, and I wish you a nice afternoon and a good weekend.